The big story at this hour coming to us from Mumbai, where heavy rain since last night has paralyzed the city. Waterlogging in most of the areas, and 119 pumps have been operational to clear waterlogging. Trains have been very badly hit. In fact, we are hearing that the BMC has issued an alert asking people not to avoid unnecessary travel today, parents not to send their children to school, and there's a high tide this afternoon and heavy rain forecast this evening as well. My colleague Saurabh has sent us this report from Mumbai.
Heavy rains in Mumbai have thrown rail traffic out of gear. I'm at Malad station, and here you can see that people are stranded at the platforms waiting for trains. Since the morning there have been no trains to Churchgate, and what we see so far are stranded people waiting for trains. The BMC has issued a flood alert asking people not to travel unless it's absolutely necessary. In fact, the trains that are coming in right now are only going up to Andheri. They cannot travel beyond Andheri. So, and of course they are extremely crowded. So people have been advised to stay at home as long as possible.
And my colleague Saurabh now joining us on the phone line. Saurabh, give us a sense of what the situation's like in Mumbai.
Well, situation not very good. Life thrown out of gear, city paralyzed, waterlogging reported from most low-lying areas. South Mumbai, of course, is doing much better because, remember, the BMC has been able to complete a lot of flood management and road work before the monsoon. So South Mumbai is doing better, but if you talk about the suburbs, there's still a lot of work to be completed, that's to be done in the next 2 periods. And what we know is that commuters are having a harrowing time today. The train services have been suspended. Harbour Line not running completely. Train services between CST and Kurla completely suspended. Train services between Churchgate and Andheri hardly available. In fact, the Western Railway is running staggered services up to Andheri for commuters who want to get to Andheri and then probably try and take some other mode of transport. Heavy waterlogging reported from areas like Matunga, Dadar, Parel, Hinmata, Andheri, Jogeshwari, and in the western suburbs, and Mulund and Vikhroli in the eastern suburbs. Clearly, there is also a high tide in the afternoon, and that's the cause of worry. Because remember, Mumbai is a city built on reclaimed land from the sea. And if there is a high tide that coincides with heavy rains, there is very little even the administration can do. It leads to flood situations, and that is basically because of the topography of the city. Water will collect in low-lying areas, and today that situation is possible simply because heavy rains have been forecast along with a high tide at around 2 p.m. The high tide is expected to be at 4.6 meters, which is why the BMC has sent out this alert. Do not travel unless absolutely necessary. Parents have been asked not to send children to school, and of course people have been asked to stay home and work from home as far as possible.
Saurabh, what's just to look at timing and give our viewers really a sense of what time really not to definitely venture out. You're saying the high tide this afternoon. So what's the government really saying?
Well, you know, there is one thing in Mumbai, the peak hours, and that is when if rail traffic is thrown out of gear, there is nothing you can do. The railways are the lifeline of this city. If rail traffic is thrown out of gear during peak hours, the city does come to a standstill. That's exactly what's happened. Now, coupled with that heavy rains and a high tide, this is the worst situation that Mumbaikars can hope for, or even the administration can hope for. And that is why there is this alert that's been sent out. It's a high tide coupled with very heavy showers. The rain seem show no sign of subsiding. So clearly, the BMC is asking, do not travel, especially during the high tide when there will be waterlogging. If there is heavy rains, that's at around 2 p.m. And of course, avoid traveling for the day because traffic has been thrown out of gear. Rail services have been thrown out of gear in the financial capital.
So you're saying that post 2 p.m. The government clearly saying that people there mustn't travel. So anyone who needs to get home needs to do that, before 2 p.m. today.
Well, if people have to travel, they have to. And of course, there are those alternative means of transport, for example, hiring a car, but that will mean that you'll be stuck in a traffic jam for a long time. The ideal situation is not to travel. If you have to, only then travel. And of course, the high tide period, which is about an hour or so from 2 p.m., is when the situation is going to be at its worst if the rains continue like they have been continuing since last night, pounding the city. And of course, the high tide means that the water cannot drain out. Now, one thing to remember even in this situation is that 2 new pumping stations have been put into service, Love Grove and Cleveland pumping stations, that are servicing areas like Prabhadevi and Worli, which is doing much better than other years because of these service stations. But there is one more pumping station that has to come up, that is the Britannia pumping station, which will be operational only by the year end. So the Mumbaikars won't have the benefit of utilizing the services of that pumping station yet, which is why you are still seeing floods, waterlogging in areas like Dadar, in areas like Prabhadevi. But of course, clearly bad day for Mumbaikars. Very little even the administration can do when simply because of the topography of the city. Flood management is something that's been the concern of the government. In fact, just a few days back, Chief Minister Devendra Fadnavis did sign an agreement with the Dutch Prime Minister on water management in the city. And at that time also we had asked him of what about flood management in Mumbai, given the topography of the city, given the weather conditions that the city faces every monsoon, being a coastal city. And at that time the Chief Minister had assured that there would be a complete new look at flood and water management in the city with the Dutch expertise. Because remember, in the Netherlands, Amsterdam is a city that has a lot of areas that are below sea level, and they've had good experience there. So that is something that the administration is now considering implementing in Mumbai. But the immediate problem is today. The immediate problem is now of how to get people from point A to point B in the city. The BMC says that avoid traveling if you can, and especially between 2 p.m. and 5 p.m., which is where the high tide will set in.